The personal views and opinions expressed by our podcast guests are their own and are not legal advice or official statements by their organizations. Hello, my name is Debbie Reynolds of the Diva Talk Privacy Podcast, where we talk with business leaders around the world about data privacy issues that businesses need to know now. I am super happy to have Marie-Claire Péroux from Paris, France on the show today. Hello, Marie-Claire.
Hello, David.
Marie and I met on LinkedIn. I always read all of the things that she posts, and for some reason, I think that there are four of us that always end up talking. So it's Marie-Claire from Paris, is Tara from the UK, and then Pia Tendor from Copenhagen. So a lot of times we end up exchanging information, or sometimes we end up in four-way conversations on LinkedIn, oh my goodness, did you see what happened with this particular issue? But I want to introduce Marie for sure. So Marie-Claire is a consultant, jurist, GDPR specialist, international European economic and commercial law expert. Also, she is just really brilliant about, you're very forthright about your feelings related to privacy and how that impacts people in the digital age. So welcome.
Thank you, Debbie. Thank you for inviting me.
I want to start out with something I read last night that you posted. So it was your morning and my night, right? So someone was talking about data privacy, and that's something I talk about too. But for me, when I'm talking with people in Europe, I like to hear them tell me about their feelings about privacy, because it's very different, I think, than people perceive it here in the U.S. So tell me your thoughts about privacy and data privacy and the distinction.
Well, first of all, why I like to follow you, because you are one of the rare Americans talking about privacy as a human right. And that's the main difference for me between all US or any other culture. Here in Europe, it is a human right, and you see it in for instance, every law, every French law I read, it refers to human right. So it's not something to take lightly. And when I read, for example, the CCPA in California, they talk about persons as consumer. And here you are. Here's the difference. In Europe, data is not a commodity you can sell. It has nothing to do with, although we might discuss that later on, but it's a completely different view. And that's the heart of the problem. Because, for instance, you see processes in the US developing new processes, but they work in an entirely different world, in an entire culture. And I think that's the heart of a problem between Europe and US. We do not speak the same language when we talk about privacy.
I agree with that wholeheartedly. And I always talk about that, the difference between human and consumer rights. So Consumer rights is much more narrow in its focus. So it's hard, you can't really compare consumer right to privacy to a human right, because a human right you'll just have. So consumer right is something that you kind of grant to someone, right, if they're a consumer. So I think it is really important to talk about that distinction, but so much of the laws and regulations in the U.S. are based around commerce. So it's very much a different mindset, where I think a lot of people in the U.S. feel like they have privacy in the same way that you all have in Europe, and we just don't have it. So privacy belongs to your information. It doesn't really belong to you. So I tell people, your social security number in the U.S. has more privacy protection than you do as an individual. So your data, in some instances, is protected in a way that you aren't. So for me, I'm really I'm keen on having that distinction made in the U.S., where we are looking at privacy from a human right perspective as opposed to a consumer right.
Yeah, but I don't see it coming in the US. I don't think so. But you see, for instance, I was just reading just before we connected in France with COVID. The French government sent an SMS to many French people advising them to take care and blah, blah, blah. And many people started to go to our authority, which is the CNIL, and they were complaining. And the CNIL just posted today, okay, it's okay. They had the right to send you a direct SMS, which goes far. You know, people start to be very well aware that it's not normal that the government all of a sudden send them a directly SMS. Do they have my phone number? What's going on? And the CNIL had to come up with a statement. And that's make all the difference. You see, French people or European people are more aware and go much faster in defending their rights, especially privacy. Privacy is really something you would think no, but yes, people are much more aware, and even the youngest generation. So it's nothing to do with you're used to talk about yourself on social media. Yeah. I think they are still very attached to privacy.
Well, and I tell people too, because, you know, I talk with a lot of people in cybersecurity as well, that privacy existed before computers. So, so those rights are intrinsic in many ways, and they are about expressing things that a human would want for themselves. So I think the digital age has made it different, because you're saying, now I'm taking something that was inherently private or no one really cared about before, and then you're creating a thing of it, you know, digital, and then now people have to really try to assert their rights so that they can have that not be used in a way that they don't want. So like the example I use is, let's say, like, no one cared 30 years ago if you walked down the street and got milk. So, but now you have a phone in your pocket, and that trip that you take now is being recorded by your phone, and someone may be using that to sell it or whatever. So it's just a different way, a different lens to look at things, but it's very different in terms of how it's expressed.
Yeah, but the core signification is still the right to think by yourself, to have a right to be alone, right to close your door, even though you have a connected object in your house, the right to say no.
Yeah.
And it's still very much alive, and I hope it stays alive, although everything goes in the other way, everything pushes towards less and less privacy.
Yeah.
And it's annoying, but I think people like us, or jurists or lawyers, should resist still.
Yeah.
Even though sometimes it must be lost cause, but still, I think we should resist, and we should say no. People should still say no.
Yeah. Well, I'm a technologist, so I bridge those gaps, and it's interesting to me to talk to different groups based on kind of their perception of what privacy is. It's very different. I think the more talking that we do together and sharing and breaking down of barriers between each other, I think definitely helps. So there's something, now you're very passionate about privacy by design. So I would love for you to explain to me what it is about that makes it, that you're so passionate about.
Well, passionate, I mean, in a perfect world, on paper, if everybody would apply privacy by design, we wouldn't be discussing problems and should I use this process, or should I hire this guy? I mean, if every producer of connected objects, or if every processor would think before producing about privacy by design, I think we would have much less problems. That's the perfect world. But it has a cost. You know, I consult with small businesses, small and medium businesses, which is another world. Huh? And you arrive in a company, very often they have developed for 2 years their product. And very often it's always about processing private information or personal data. And you arrive after 2 years of development, and you start saying, by the way, you You use some things where you put everything on Amazon, or you use this for development, and you use some tools that are really not okay with GDPR. And they look at you and think, it's a hindrance to my business. It's an inconvenience. Mm-hmm. And I think still many companies do not understand that they have to have privacy by design from the start. And mm-hmm. It's part of their business. It's not on top. It's not, it looks better. It's part of their business. And this is the thing I meet on and on again and again. I arrive too late in the process.
Right.
And then when I say I think compliance is a cost. It's mm-hmm. an annoyance. I will have to change this. Do I have to stop doing this or that? Which not. Probably you just have to adapt the way you do things. It's not always a big no.
Right.
And in collecting personal data for several years, and they have a large list, and nobody they have a legal basis, and then that's the problem. So yes, privacy by design and by default again and again. I just had because I'm a jurist, but I want to understand the technology part. Yeah. You cannot be only a jurist. You have to understand how it works for real.
That's right.
I just had a course to French university, young developers. Next year they are going to go on the market, on the job market, and they had 2 hours of privacy by design. What is it? What are you looking for? And I was all on principles, because if you don't know the principles, you cannot apply them.
Right.
So I think what's lagging is knowledge, education of technical people, of engineers, because they are the one implementing the privacy by design.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. When the GDPR first came out, and I read the concepts about privacy by design, I think that's definitely my favorite part of it, because I think a lot of times when you're looking at laws, people create it they create it after some harm has happened, right? So they're like, don't do this, don't do that, or whatever. But to me, the concept of privacy by design is so forward looking, it's so proactive. So that was so surprising to me that was in the law. And I think that's part that, especially if people aren't really rethinking their process. I felt like when the GDPR became law in 2016, in May, I woke up that morning, it was May 25th, and I thought that when I woke up, I'd see all this news about GDPR and how it was going to be like, change, tectonic change in the way people handle data. In the US, there was like not one story in the news about it. And I was very disappointed because I thought, this is so major. I mean, especially about the design part, because if you're not thinking about these concepts at the beginning, you're not gonna, like you said, you can't add it at the end. You can't stick it on. It's not a tweak that you make. It's kind of a point of view that you have to have, or a concept you have to be able to grasp as you go along the development process.
Yeah, and GDPR is the first law that includes privacy by design. It's the first time it's mandatory. It's not even choice. But I think everything behind this is the lack of education of business owners, small business, medium business owners. I'm not talking about the large companies. They have the means to hire legal staff. But for instance, in France, most of the companies are small to medium businesses.
Right.
We are not talking, that's the main part of the economy. And there's still a lack of knowledge still now about privacy by design, about GDPR, their obligations. It's still lagging so much.
Yeah, it is. It is.
So I don't know what to do.
I think we have to keep educating and keep talking to people until they really understand, until it sinks in. I try to work with, I work with companies also on emerging technology. So I like to get involved very early. I'm working on a project with people who create augmented reality and virtual reality products. And so we're working on a framework that the developers can read through and use before they even start that process, because as you said, after the process is developed, you can't really make the tweaks or, those changes. If it's not baked in, it won't really stick.
Yeah, you can, but it has a cost. It
is a cost.
It's a cost problem as well. It's not only a problem, it's mainly part. Should I go? If I go there, well, my business is going to be harmed. I'm going to have to change everything. My code is not good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know. It's so bad. But I would love to know what, in terms of the Privacy Shield, the EU-US Privacy Shield and validation. First of all, what do you think of it, and how are your clients reacting to this?
Why do I think? I think it's a real mess to explain it to anybody to understand. But first of all, most companies, small companies, I still insist, are not really aware of what tool they use. They have not even paid any attention to what they use. A developer says, okay, I need this. I look, banga, I take this, I download it, I sign, okay, let's go. They have no idea what they signed for. And they, even once their product is in production, I mean, once they start using and they start gathering personal data, they have no idea on which tools it's based. So what I think is that education, again, you arrive and you say, oh, by the way, we have to look through everything you use to produce this nice new software. They have no idea. Mainly they don't know what happened, because, okay, we know, we have been looking, okay, but most of the people have no idea. It has not been in the news, and most of business owners have no idea what happened. And when you try to convey to them that now all of a sudden they have to look for the entire judicial system of another country, I mean,
yeah,
it's nice and fine for a large company again, but I just reread before talking to you. I reread the EDPB guideline after the post-Schrems 2.
Yeah.
Nice, great, but no small companies can do that. None. Yeah. And if I offer my service to do that, it's going to cost so much that it's just mind-boggling and impossible.
Oh, yeah.
So from a practical point of view, because let's get practical, right now I would say, okay, look for the things you can get rid of. For instance, if you use the tool to send your newsletter, easy to switch to something else, because there are other offers. But if you talk to a company who has developed everything on Amazon Web Service, and you come and say, okay, they say that everything is fine, standard contractual clause, well, we are fine, but still you read some line that, oh, from time to time we might be able to to open your file, and we have to go to your data at one point from the US. And here we go, it's open to Schrems 2.
Right.
How can you tell to a business to switch the entire business from Amazon Web Service to what? What's the offer in Europe? I mean, it's difficult. I mean, it's good. You have to explain that. I think it's too high policy for small. It's big concepts, big things. It's nice and fine, but try to explain it to a small business. It's just.
I know. I had Alan Woods on my show, and he really talked to that point, which is true. So a lot of these things are so hard to do from a technical and practical point of view, because, and then just sort of doing it without any warning. It's like, oh my goodness. So people are really, companies for the most part want to follow, the law or the edicts. But I mean, so much, especially right now during COVID, and a lot of people are having so many financial concerns, with their businesses. So especially, you don't want to introduce something new that's going to create like an additional burden or additional cost on those people to make these changes. So it's definitely a tension. And I agree that the bigger companies probably are the ones that are using this transfer mechanism the most. And they probably have the better way to either pivot or litigate.
Yes. or to audit or to ask for more something more in their contractual obligation, even though it's not enough. But look, I have a very precise example. I was talking to a business owner, a small business owner, but a nice software he developed himself. Everything on Amazon Web Service with some data very sensitive, like health data or children data. And I was telling him, okay, even though AWS is certified in Europe to hold health data, it got the certification. I told him maybe nowadays maybe you should switch to something else, something in because there are other clouds certified for health data in Europe. And he answered me, yeah, but AWS is cheaper and it's the offer is great. Why should I do it? And then you see the French government. They have this health data hub. They developed it. And who did they choose? Microsoft.
Right.
And of course, the data privacy authority, the CNIL, said no, not possible. You cannot put all health data from France on Microsoft. Impossible. What was the answer? Okay, nice, but okay, we give ourselves 2 years to switch.
Right.
So you see that, and you are talking to a business owner, 10 people company, and you're telling him, oh, you have a health data, you must switch to something in Europe. It's not possible. Because if you look at GDPR, there are certain fields where member states still have a say. For instance, health data, everything relating to work, how do you say, a job law.
Right.
In these fields, states still have their own laws. They can add up.
Right.
So France is not specific in that term for health data. Every other member state, which is a problem for the free flow of data, which we go to the Data Governance Act. They want to open this flow of data that member states keep for themselves because they are highly sensitive. Health data for once. So it's not specific to France. But yes, health data, you have to be extra serious on those, and you have to abide by local laws on top, because GDPR is fine and nice, but it doesn't cover everything.
That's right. That's right. Well, you just mentioned the Data Governance Act. So if you could explain to me explain to the audience what it is, and then give me your thoughts about it.
So it's still in discussion. So
yes, that's right.
Too much hooked on it because it might change a lot. I've read it through. Well, on paper, as usual, it's fine and nice, but in practice, there are still things to be discussed, and I think there are things which will change. So I read through it again and again. What I got is that all of a sudden, Europe, we were talking about human rights, fine and nice, but now they perceive that data has a value too, and that they would like this value to be accessible by all the businesses, including health data, including sensitive data that member states have a tendency to keep for themselves. So they want to open the free flow in EU, not a free flow outside EU.
Right.
But it's normal. It's a free flow of market in EU. So what I understood, because it's not so clear for everything, they want to have to separate, how do you say, the flow. You have a data holders that could be public, governments, companies, natural persons, data sharing services, which is a new category, and data users, developers, small businesses who would want to have access to this data. So it's a separation of power. Not one should have the power to access everything at once. Okay? And there is a new wording with data, I don't know in English, data altruism, which seems, I've never heard anything like that before. I don't know if you did.
No.
For data, which is a bit counterintuitive for US, certainly again, data has a value, so data is a commercial value, and here we talk data altruism, data for the sake of it, for the good of humanity. okay, for general interest. And what I find a bit annoying is that this altruism, the general interest, is very vaguely defined, not even defined. So I think there's much more work to do. So basically, some companies or some people would give their data for altruism, for the good of the people.
Right.
Okay. In practice, I don't know, but I mean, okay, good. It's something which has to be discussed again. It's too vague, much too vague.
Yeah.
Worried about is okay. So you have these three stakeholders, and the commission has a large part in the working on all this. Has a lot of power. Especially there is an adequacy again, not the adequacy, the GDPR adequacy of a country, but this data altruism adequacy, and its adequacy. Ensured by the Commission.
Right.
And they look at the protection of intellectual property and trade secrets in the country of export of data. Okay, how do you manage that with a GDPR adequacy? I don't know. And again, they take the same thing as Schrems too. Protection effectively applied and enforced. They take the same view of effective judicial redress. You find the same thing. But I wonder how do they do that with adequacy under GDPR? It's another layer, another adequacy, another check. And the second point is that this Data Act concerns all data, not only private data, not only personal data. So data for companies, IoT, everything, commercial data. Yeah. But I would like to know how to make this work with the GDPR. I find questions of consent, for instance, people consenting to give their data to intermediaries, and these intermediaries will sell them for a fee, but small fee, to companies, or they want to develop new products. This consent form, they want to develop a consent form. The Commission would, I wrote it down because it's not so clear. European Data Altruism Consent Form. That would be a European consent form. Okay, how do they do that with this consent that everybody tries to get under GDPR? Right. It's very confusing to me. Either we all go to this consent form, and it would be nice to have a uniform consent form, because this concept, GDPR concept that everybody tries to get, is very difficult to get.
That's true. That's true. This is what I came up with, and sort of the reason why I think that this is happening. So when the GDPR came out, there was like a letter that the working group came out with about they definitely want strong protections on the GDPR, but they don't want the GDPR to squelch innovation. So I think the thought is, not for the big companies. So the big companies, they'll be fine. They're going to be okay. But for the small and medium-sized companies that are wanting to innovate or need data or information, they wanted to try to come up with a way that they could give people access to data they would probably, like someone wouldn't normally consent to. So I think the idea is to try to make it in some way more anonymous, in a way that they can share it more, or, use, pseudonyms and stuff like that. But it is confusing. I agree. I don't know, when they started talking about it, I'm like, so how are they actually going to do this from like a technological perspective? Like, I didn't understand how, like, is it a many databases? Is it one database?
It's written that, for instance, if public authority wants to give access to its data, it remains the controller. I think there's always a transfer of responsibility with these intermediaries.
That's right.
You would put all your data, and it's not only anonymized data, from what I understood. It doesn't have to be only anonymized, because anonymized data is not always exploitable. Sometimes you have to have access to real data, I guess. And there's so much, you concentrate large data files, sensitive large data files, to these intermediaries. First of all, security, transfer, and when you see how in governments, when you see in public authorities, the security they have is not always up to standard. And you ask
right.
this authority to send large sensitive data, large list of the sensitive data to these intermediaries. My concern is how, and there were discussions here about data portability, because they have already under GDPR a hard time to find a common concept of data portability, or technically, how do you do it? Can you, I want to take my data and transfer it to another service, but technically it doesn't work so well. And some companies are at a loss to find a common way to transfer data from one service to be exploitable by another service.
Right, because you can, so for a company, this is a really good point about data portability. So, right, so a company can give you your data in whatever form that they, can export it to you. But that doesn't mean that you're going to be able to take it and put it someplace else.
Behind data portability, there was a sense that, especially competition, a company cannot keep the data for itself, and it should be open to competition. Great, but since each company is very protective of its business, how do you transfer? Because if you ask Google or if you ask Facebook transfer of your data, they have, you click and they give you all the data. How is it useful to you as a person? How can you transfer it to any other? What you receive, of course, they did transfer the data. You have your data. The second point in how are you going to transfer all this data coming from different member states, from different constraints, local constraints, and you want to bring all this data to be portable, to be able to exploit, to make it exploitable by other companies. Technically, I'm not a technician, but how do you do this and secure in a secure way? Second point. I'm very concerned by the security side on all this.
As am I. I'm very concerned. I hear, so I read the act as well, and I've looked at the European data strategy as well. But I really do want to see the technical aspects of how they are able to achieve this technologically.
They have not yet achieved it, that's for sure, because under GDPR it's still not achieved. It's the same problem as GDPR. As well, they set aside a lot the GDPR. I think we should talk, okay, you see it's mentioned across the European Data Act, but I think they've not thought through enough that among this data, a large part will be personal data still.
That's right, yeah.
Company data is mainly personal data nowadays. Okay, they have a production data, but I don't think they will want to give it even for a treason. Large chunk will be personal data. And I would like to see more how they want to consent to transfer of this personal data. What sort of consent? I mean, like, people are already very confused with consent forms and consent to transfer my data. And then we add up another layer of consent. Okay, it has to be discussed much more.
It does, absolutely. Well, because we're all confused too about this. So I think, especially on an individual level, like, what do I do? How do I do it? I think that's the question.
Because you see, of course, every company wants to have access to this data. Of course, they want to have access. It's a gold mine for them. But basically, a lot of this data will be personal data. So persons will have to accept, even if it's health data for further studies. And I think it's going to be extremely confusing, extremely difficult to explain what this is all about. Why should I give my data for companies to develop new services, to make more money? Why do I get from it? That's what altruism part is, I guess.
Yeah, that's definitely the next question. So even if people don't want to monetize their data, I think, they want to know, how does this benefit me?
Yeah, you can monetize data because it's a human right, and human right has no value.
Right.
But this, I'm really attached to that. Your EU right now wants to monetize data. And I think it should not be monetized. That's another difference with US part. We do monetize data. We do not, and people should not sell the data because the value is infinite. It's a human right. But still, why should I give? Why as a company should I give it? I don't know if I did. And there was such, not many mentions, but just a small mention of small businesses again. Small businesses, because in the end, that's what they want. They want more competition. They want small businesses to have access to a larger set of data. But data is not held by large companies, again.
That's right.
They suggest that they have a cooperative. I don't know, it's a French word, but I know in English how you pronounce it anyway. Small businesses would aggregate in this cooperative and have access to the data as such, because individually it would be much more difficult to have access.
That's true. That's true.
You have to have a common goal between these companies to find a common interest.
That's true.
And I don't know how you balance that with competition.
That's a hard issue to even figure out. But I'm sure we'll be talking about this for many years to come, trying to figure this out.
But it's the idea is there, and yes, companies are eager to have access to these data, of course. You know, I wanted to talk just briefly. I was listening to X webinars, and there's a French company, provider of electricity, very large provider of electricity, and they said something interesting. But they were their DPO said we are becoming a data company. We were a provider of electricity, but now we are basically a data company because our smart electricity, registered, how do you call it? Data has become our main goal to develop new services. And I think that's quite interesting to hear.
Oh, yeah. I've heard that too. People have said, almost all companies are data companies now because they need this information, whether they're developing products or getting new services, there is an attachment to that data. So the question is, how do you get the data, do it legally, do it in the right way? So I think that's the question everybody's grappling with. I think, especially for smaller businesses where I feel like people want to give less data. People want to trust people they give their data to. So I think they're going to give their data to less people. And I think that smaller, medium-sized businesses will suffer more if they can't gain that trust.
The term trust in the Data Governance Act, you see it a lot. If you try to count it, I didn't count it, but trust is everywhere in this text. They want to bring trust in giving the data. So that means that they understand that there is a trust problem.
That's right. I agree.
Companies and from individuals. So they want to bring trust. Okay. Personally, I don't trust anybody to transfer my data left, right, center, and especially health data. No.
Oh my goodness. That's true. Well, we're coming up on the end of our session. This is fantastic. I would like to know before we end, if it was the world according to Marie Claire, what type of changes would you like to see in, regulations, either in the EU or around the world, related to privacy?
Oh, EU has, I think it's load of regulations and case laws. I think we are covered there for quite some time before even we get to apply the GDPR properly in every company. So it's going to take some more time, so no more regulation. I think regulation is fine and nice, but it's really heavy to make it through all small businesses. So I think Europe is quite covered, I think, and I quite like the way Europe is handling privacy protection. And you can see that for instance, we didn't talk about it, but there's a convention 108 plus from the Council of Europe, which is not the EU, but Council of Europe, which adapts the GDPR in its treaty. And this treaty is the only other way to impose privacy protection internationally. So I don't know how many signatories they have, maybe 47, 48 countries. I think that's where we should go. But GDPR-like rules are beginning to spread. And I would love US to have one big rule for federal rule instead of Illinois is good, okay, CC. okay, stop it, because when you want to make, from EU, want to make business with the US, it's a headache. It's just mind-boggling. Huh?
Yes.
So I'd love to see more, how do you say that, something more a common ground for vendors and for handling personal data. But again, we do not have the same culture. I mentioned US and I mentioned China.
Oh yeah, that's true. Yeah, even China is developing comprehensive data privacy laws.
Try to send data from EU to China nowadays. I mean, quite impossible.
Very true. Very true. Well, yeah, thank you. I agree with that as well, because I think that's what we want here in the U.S. And we're looking, I've admired quite a lot over the, 25 years or so, the things that the EU has been doing with regulation related to privacy. So we're gonna keep up the good fight, Marie Claire, and keep moving forward. But thank you so much for being on the show. I really enjoyed this. This is very enlightening, and I'm sure the listeners will really love to hear your point of view.
Well, I hope so. Thank you for the invitation. I had a great time talking to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Okay, see you. Bye.